Okay, heads up, my creative brothers and sisters. Not Real Art now has an exclusive membership program designed just for you. If you're an artist or an art lover and you appreciate what we do here at Not Real Art and you'd like to join the family and help support the cause and celebrate creative culture and the artists who make it, please consider becoming a member today. Your membership will help support our work, such as funding our artist grant and production costs for all the programs and content we produce. Your membership will also help us stay independent and commercial free. And when you do become a member, you'll get valuable benefits and perks we think you'll find very cool. And becoming a member is super affordable. Just $5 a month for artists and $10 a month for art lovers. So to become a member of the Not Real Art family, simply go to notrealart.com, click on membership to sign up, and help us celebrate and elevate the creative culture we love and the artists who make it. Thank you.
Warning: the Not Real Art podcast is intended for creative audiences only. The Not Real Art podcast celebrates creativity and creative culture worldwide. It contains material that is fresh, fun, and inspiring and is not suitable for boring old art snobs. Now, let's get started and enjoy the show.
Greetings and salutations, my creative brothers and sisters. Welcome to the Not Real Art podcast, where we celebrate creative culture and the artists who make it. I'm your host, Sourdough. My co-host, the esteemed Man One, is on assignment today, so it's just me here in the booth. I want to thank you all for supporting us and continuing to listen. We do this for you. And I want to talk to you a little bit about our show today, because the next couple of episodes over the next few weeks are going to be a little bit unique, because on October 24th, we're the media sponsor for a show that Crew West Studio, our mothership, is producing called Indivisible. And it's a political art exhibition that, like I said, we're producing. And it's a great show. It's going to be a great show. So definitely want you guys to check it out on October 24th when it goes live, just by going to indivisible2020.org. But the whole reason we're doing Indivisible, which again is a political art exhibition, was to address stuff going on in our country right now. You know, obviously it's been a hell of a year. And certainly after the murder of George Floyd, I think like everybody, were thinking about, well, what could we do to help, make a difference or help address the conversation, add some value to the conversation, and, be a positive voice in what has been a pretty challenging year. It's only going to get more challenging over the next few weeks as we come into the election, and depending on how things play out over the next few weeks and months as we sort out the votes and see who the legitimate winner of the presidential election is going to be. So anyway, we decided many weeks ago that we thought that, given how divided the country is and divided people seem to be, that it would be interesting to curate a show that would address some of these issues. And so we asked our friend Karen Ferrito, who is a political artist who's done some incredible work. She's got death threats for her work. She is on the front lines, no doubt. But Karen also happens to be a Not Real Art grant winner from 2019. And so we think of Karen as being kind of in the Not Real Art family as one of our grant recipients, which, by the way, if you're an artist listening and you haven't applied for a 2021 grant, be sure to do that. But Karen and I started talking about, what we could do. She came up with this amazing idea for a show called Indivisible, sort of exploring what it means to be indivisible today. Many of us grew up stating the Pledge of Allegiance and, saying that we're, indivisible, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Turns out that's pretty aspirational. We've always been very divided, and we're still divided today more than ever, it seems. And so we thought it'd be great to have a show that we could have some great artists come together and explore what indivisible means these days, what it means to be divided, what it means to be united in this country today and even around the world. And so Karen has been a great partner and has been curating this show. She's been working with us and our partners at Sugar Press Art to curate, I think, what is going to be an incredible show. We've got some incredible artists: Andrea Arejo, Linda Leike, Gabe Galt, Edward Culver, John Mark Edwards, Kaylin Campbell, Kay Brown, Man One, Leroy Johnson, Ted Meyer, Aaron Yoshi, Miles Regis, Anna Stump, Linda Vallejo, and Meredith Vandenberg, who are all going to be in the show. And so Karen's been doing this great job of curating. We've got some amazing artists. And, Sugar Press has been an incredible partner. They're going to be creating prints around much of the art in the show that you can buy. As part of the show, we thought it would be great to have the guests, on the podcast, or the artists on the podcast as guests, to talk about their work, talk about the show, just talk about the state of our union. And so the next few episodes of the podcast are going to be conversations with these artists. All these conversations were done remotely over the interweb. It was technically challenging at times, but we were able to pull it off. And so we've got, Leroy Johnson coming up. We've got Linda Vallejo, Man One. We've got Mary Sherwood Brock, Joshua Waddles, Karen Ferrito, Ted Meyer, Aaron Yoshi, Kaylin Campbell, all who are going to be guests on the show. And so we're thrilled about that and want to continue to promote this show. The show is going to hang virtually until the inauguration. And, so you'll be able to go to indivisible2020.org to access the show and look at the art and experience the art. But we're going to have a Zoom reception opening on October 24th. So if you're hearing this before October 24th, please come to our opening Zoom reception that evening, where you can hear from our artists and ask questions, so on and so forth. But like I said, the art itself, the exhibition itself, will hang until the inauguration. And oh, by the way, we want to make the Indivisible show an annual event, because this is an ongoing conversation. Certainly building unity in this country is a long-term project that, we're fully aware that one show is not going to, solve our problems. We need to keep having these conversations. We need to keep speaking truth to power and challenging people to think more broadly and more deeply about these issues. And so Indivisible is a show that we hope to do year over year. This is our first year, Indivisible 2020. So definitely go to indivisible2020.org and check out the show. I want to, shout out to Karen Ferrito, who has been curating the show, and she's been doing a powerful, amazing, incredible job. I want to shout out to Sugar Press Art, one of our key sponsors in putting the show together. Many of their artists are featured in the show. And then, of course, Not Real Art is the media sponsor, so you'll be hearing from us about the show moving forward. So definitely check it out. On today's episode, we've got political artists Linda Vallejo and Man One. And this is a great conversation between two powerful artists here in LA, both of whom have done incredible work addressing injustice in our world and in our community, and certainly here in LA. Given their Mexican heritage, they had a very rich dialogue between them, which I was, for the most part, a fly on the wall in terms of just listening to what they had to say, which, I think so many times we just need to shut up and listen and learn and listen to what people are saying and talking about, and try to understand people's experiences. Because Linda and Man One, their lives have been very different in many ways, but they share a lot of the same struggles. But certainly as artists, have a lot to say and have that critical, discerning eye that artists have. And of course, their work in the show, the Indivisible show, is going to be fantastic. But without further ado, let's get into this conversation with the one and only Linda Vallejo and LA's own Man One. Let's go! Linda Vallejo, Man One, welcome to Not Real Art.
I'm here.
Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you guys on the Not Real Art podcast. You know, what brings us here today is a show that you both are exhibiting in, that Crew West Studio is producing and Karen Frito is curating. And the show is a political art exhibition, a virtual exhibition called Indivisible. What attracted you to being a part of the show besides Karen's invitation? I mean, what about the idea and the notion of indivisibility attracted you? What does indivisible mean to you, Linda?
Well, I think it says in the mission statement that united we can accomplish, united we can get things done, united we can make things happen, a united voice, a united front. The idea of uniting all nations, all creeds, all colors, all genders, all races, all orientations always interests me, because the intersection between that philosophy and the actual work, that's a difficult row to hoe, and you have to really spend a lot of time thinking it through. What does that image actually look like? And also the idea that, now, oddly enough, socio-political images is being considered in a higher level than it ever has before. Socio-political image has its place, but it has its place, if you will. And now, because of the everything that's going on, I mean, this is just really a volcanic action here. Everything's going on at once. Socio-political image finally has a real place. And I think it's time for those of us who are committed to socio-political image to step forward. And in this case, to be indivisible, to be united, and show the best that we've got about what it means to have not only a viewpoint about beauty, not only to have a viewpoint about history, not only to have a viewpoint about technique or artistry in itself, but also to have a viewpoint about what we think about what's going on in our world today.
Yeah. To add exactly what Linda said, to add to that, the name of the show kind of intrigued me too, because indivisible is a word that I've been using once a day since I was in first grade, because when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, at the end of it, you say Pledge Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, whatever. And then you say indivisible. I remember the words in the Pledge of Allegiance, you just recite them like, they just become something you just memorize and just say. You don't really, when you're in first grade, second grade, fifth grade, you're not really paying attention to what you're saying. And all of a sudden, later on, you're in high school, you're in college, and you're thinking about these things that you pledged to, that you now believe in, that you've been indoctrinated with. Yeah. And you start realizing the language that's been placed in front of you, the language that you've been asked to believe in, and you realize that you've been indoctrinated into believing a certain thing, right? And so all these years you've been told that we're one country, that we're one people, that we're all Americans, right?
Yeah.
And then, as you grow older, you realize, wow, I didn't get to walk into that restaurant because of the color of my skin, or you see what's going on in the country right now with people divided left and right. Mm-hmm. And you wonder, like, wait, so was all that just bullshit? Like all that stuff, that mantra that I had to say all these years, the America that they wanted me to believe in, like, is that all just BS? And so all that questioning starts happening as you get older, and especially being a Latino, where you're just not represented. We make up 50% of LA, and
close to it, very close to it.
Yeah, very close to 50%, 40 something percent. We're not anywhere in Hollywood. We're not. Our faces are on the screen, even though we build Hollywood, we clean Hollywood, we take care of all the Hollywood kids, and there's so many like nannies and gardeners and drivers and laborers who work in these film studios. My dad worked in the movie studios for like almost 30 years. Doesn't matter, like, we're invisible. All of a sudden you start realizing all these things and questioning, well, what does this country really mean for me? do I belong in this country? Is it just all wordplay? So for me, it's been always important to speak about my point of view and to, obviously people say, well, being political, but what is political, right? I think I heard one time an artist say that, all art is political, because even if you decide to do a landscape, you're deciding not to be political, therefore you're being political. That's kind of how I feel about it. And so when this show came about, too bad we can't do it in person and have an actual hanging exhibit like we used to back in the day, a year ago. But it's fine, it'll reach the masses. Everyone's on their computer anyway. So this is like one of my first, it's not my first, but it's one of the few fully online exhibitions that I've been a part of. But I'm happy to be part of it, So I jumped at the opportunity when Karen called me. So yeah.
Indivisible under one nation.
Exactly.
Indivisible under one nation.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of research about where Latinos, where Mexicans were, where Mexican Americans were, and where Tejanos were in the late 1800s and the early 19th century. And one of the things that's come for me has been the idea of unskilled workers versus essential workers. And I kind of think that now is a really great time to begin using different words to describe people. I think language really helps us.
Yes.
Or deters us from moving ahead, so that if one thinks of oneself as unskilled versus essential, just that language itself can change a political viewpoint or a socio-political viewpoint or position or attitude towards people. That's kind of what I've been looking at and studying.
No, that's a great point. Absolutely.
I mean, we built the railroads.
Yeah.
70,000 to 100,000 Mexican Americans and Tejanos were on the railways, building them all the way from Texas, all the way from Louisiana, all the way to the Southwest, into the Southwest and into California. My whole contention about that is that we are an essential building block to America, to the United States and what the United States has become. We are essential to that history. And that's what drives my work in sort of focusing on Latinismo in my image.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good question that you ask. I mean, what are we asked to, why are we asked to make oath? And oath is a serious thing, especially for a little kid. But when you said that, I thought to myself, well, we're asked to make oaths in all kinds of arenas all the time, each and every one of us. Unbeknownst to ourselves, we make oaths to all kinds of systems that we want to be a part of. We make dedications to them. And it's a matter, I guess, of choosing what systems you want to be a part of, or what systems you want to bring awareness to. Because I think about the Catholic Church and all the oaths you have to make in the Catholic Church.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, lots of it, just tons and tons. Dogma.
Well, that was the other part of it. Is I went to Catholic school from first grade until I graduated from university. So I went to many years of Catholic school.
How come you didn't become a priest?
I know, right?
They're setting you up. Why didn't you become a priest? What stopped you?
I never felt that pressure, actually. And it's funny, the point I was going to make was just kind of on those lines, is that the more I went to Catholic school, the less I believed in the religion, but the more I believed in my faith. And that's kind of how I evolved, because I went to Catholic school, elementary school, for 8 years, very small. Had a good time. It was all great. Went to St. Francis High School. So it was a Franciscan high school. So all the priests, wore the robes, and it's all about piety and humility. And I had some really great priests, actually, who were teachers and stuff. The conversations in high school started being more about, it wasn't really about the dogma, but it was more about the spirituality of Catholicism. And then when I went to college, I went to Loyola Marymount, which is a Jesuit university, and the Jesuits, are the troublemakers of the Catholic Church. So there I ran into all kinds of professors who were, if they weren't wearing their little priest thing, I wouldn't think they were priests, So it always expanded my mind. I mean, I'm glad I went to those schools, and I'm glad I learned all those things. But like I said, it really opened me up to faith, and to more about on that side of things, and less about the commandments and going to the church and doing this and doing that. It just became more important about knowing that I have my faith in God, my faith in people, my love and respect for humanity, all that became way more important than being able to recite a verse in the Bible or something.
How would you correlate that? Like when you said that, it made me think about, the older I get and the more I read the newspaper and the more CNN I watch and the more Fox News I watch to see what's going on really out there, the less faith I have, or the more faith I have in democracy, but the less faith I have in the institution of government. And it kind of rings the same bell in the sense that, how government functions, that it's has a lot of problems, it wastes a lot of money, and yet I still have a real faith in the United States and in democracy and in the vote, regardless of what's going on with all the questions now. But when you said that about the Catholic Church, it kind of reminded me of the same thing. You grow up and you get real, and suddenly socio-political response is based on a real understanding of experience, a real experience of what it means to be alive and within democracy, within what a religious faith, et cetera, et cetera.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. It's the institution has been totally soured for me over the years. There's no way that you can tell me that the Catholic institution is some really important, has some kind of sanctity or whatever anymore, because we see all the stuff that's happened with kids in church and pedophilia and all that kind of stuff, and the stuff that's happened, over the centuries with the religion. But again, this is kind of the dichotomy, right, of being Latino, because all my family is super religious, very Catholic.
I would think so if they sent you to Catholic school for 12 years straight.
Yeah, and so my dad could care less about going to church.
Men don't have to. Men don't have to.
Yeah, right. Of course not.
Men don't have to. Women have to.
Women have to. Yeah.
Again, women.
But men get to be the priests. But my grandmother, rest in peace. She was super devout. My mother-in-law, super devout. My mother, very devout. It's this thing where you, and especially now with the politics, you run into these issues sometimes with people because they're all of a sudden they're talking conservative viewpoints, right? That's being triggered because of their faith.
14% of all Latinos in the nation voted for Trump.
Yeah.
14%. It started out at 35, but then they actually did all the numbers. It's 14%. We figured that's Miami and Arizona?
Yeah, exactly.
Some Texas, Miami and Arizona, because California, is definitely not going to be voted. So
yeah, but
14%. That's 15 out of every 100 people.
I've had to cancel a bunch of my family, not a lot, but a few cousins who are out there and stuff like that, because they're Trump supporters. They consider themselves Christian. And I'm like,
well, pro-life is what's got, that's the division point for Latinos, right. Is pro-life. And that's where they have this choice between politics and religion. Right. And like you say yourself, devout.
Yeah.
And I quit the Catholic Church at 15 and never went back.
Yeah, it's probably smart.
I quit it at 15 and went into Indigenous America instead.
Right.
And did that in the late 70s and early 80s before it was kosher to be considered Indígena Chicana.
Yeah.
It's still not, it's just now beginning to be okay, kind of, sort of, but you can't really practice it. You just have to wear the clothes.
Yeah.
But you can't really practice it. You just have to wear the clothes. You can wear all the jewelry you want, but don't be talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's still a difficult place to be, but that's how I raised my kids. Did you raise your kids in the Catholic Church?
Yes and no. They ended up they went to public school their whole life until high school. I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a daughter. And my daughter absolutely hated Catholic school. So she was out of there less than in a year. And then my boys because we didn't really grow up. I didn't really teach them, the whole doctrine. And I didn't indoctrinate them the way I was indoctrinated as a kid. But they really took to the high school, and my boys loved it. It was really interesting. I can, we're kind of like, what do they call them? Non-practicing Catholics or Catholics light. I don't know what you call it. But, so there's some things in the faith that they picked up on. And one of the interesting things actually has been, because of this whole pandemic, a lot of things have happened in my household, which I won't get into all of them, but some health issues and things like this. and we can't see each other physically, right? My mother-in-law actually came down with cancer earlier this year, and so we couldn't visit her and we couldn't see her because of the whole COVID thing. My daughter, who's the least Catholic of all my kids, she said, why don't we do a rosary like every night on a Zoom call with grandmother, because she knows that my mother-in-law really loves to practice her faith and read the rosary and stuff like that. So we started doing this rosary thing every night, and it really grew, and a bunch of the family started joining in. And it was really interesting because it really it was about the rosary at first, but it really became just the catalyst for us to get together every night and talk via Zoom and stuff like that. And so it kind of became a really interesting thing. And along with that, my wife has been putting candles on the kitchen table, a different candle every night, like a saint candle or something like that. And so you can imagine how many candles we've gone through. So I have a huge collection now. Instead of just throwing them away, I started collecting them in my studio. And so that's going to be part of my next body of work coming out of this pandemic. Is I have a whole series of paintings and works that are going to be based on this whole experience, which has been very surreal for me in a lot of ways, and trying to just figure it out for myself. But yeah, it's been interesting,
Earlier, you were talking about this shift away from organizations more to yourself, whether it's the church or government, right? The phrase power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely comes to mind. This note, speaking for myself, the one thing that gives me hope is the human spirit. You can't, when it's activated and when it's realized to its fullest potential, the human spirit can do great things. And I hope, right, that we get to a point where we are able to mobilize and organize around certain values, certain things, and for ourselves, not for government, not for a church. Because this idea of indivisibility, as I've realized later in life, maybe, certainly not as a kid, was always aspirational, right? It never was true. And that, in this country anyway, right, you were divided either because you were a colonizer or a settler, and then there was the indigenous people that lived here. Then maybe you were divided on whether you were a free or slave. You were divided whether you were male, female, women couldn't vote because they weren't landowners, what have you. Then you were divided because of maybe you were Republican or Democrat. Then you were divided whether, maybe it was economics, you had money, you didn't have money, but education, you had education, you didn't have education. I mean, this idea of indivisibility has always been aspirational. We've always been divided on these different lines. And yet the reality is day to day, practically in our local communities, we are very divided. But in fact, we are all together on this planet called Earth. And so as divided as we are maybe practically day to day in a little ways, we're very much united in the fate of this planet. In Linda, one of the things that's really been interesting in terms of your journey is that unlike a lot of Americans, you've traveled, you've lived various countries, various places on the earth. And many Americans, I remember reading a long time ago, 1 out of 3 Americans had a passport. 1 out of 3. And I don't know if that's still true, but I think a lot of Americans haven't traveled. I often joke that we have an island mentality in this country. And we tend to be afraid and we tend to be biased against things we don't understand and we don't have experience with. How has, not just being a woman of color, but being a woman of color that has traveled the world, right? How have those experiences traveling and living abroad impacted your view vis-a-vis our body politic here in this country and your artwork and this idea of indivisibility?
I think that you're right. I think indivisibility is an aspiration. I don't think that humanity is really capable of seeing itself as a species, that we are a human species. We just happen to have subtle differences. It's like fish in the ocean. There's many different types of fish, but they're all fish and they all live in one place together. But even in nature, fish eat each other. There's violence in nature as well. There's pecking order. There's the hierarchy. I don't really believe that humanity is capable of peace all the time. I don't believe that it's capable of indivisibility. I've experienced both. I went to middle school in Montgomery, Alabama in the 60s. So I experienced pretty harsh racism as a young girl, and I've lived in a lot of places and had opportunities to see people at work, people, how they actually function. My final philosophy through all of that is just basically a one-on-one. I believe that it's best not to feel that you have to solve the problems of the world. And you can talk about them in your art. Of course, you can talk about them in your poetry, you can talk about them in your novels, you can talk about them in film, et cetera, et cetera. But to take on the difficulty of inequality from a world point of view would break you with stress. For myself, and my own path is one-on-one. So my goal is to be respectful of an individual when I meet them, regardless of their gender or race or creed or color or age or orientation, to be respectful, because every individual must face their own life and face their own death. And, I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to try to get along, to coin a phrase. In terms of my art, I've been involved in the Chicanx, Latinx movement for about 40 years now. And I have what I call my intellectual property, which is all the experiences and knowledge and study and travel that I've gathered over a 40-year investigation. I like to study. A lot of my work comes out of, right now, data. I'm doing a lot of data work. From that experience of studying my own culture, if you will, before that I studied Egyptology, before that I studied the Greeks, before that, I went to high school in Spain, traveled all throughout Mexico. I enjoy all cultures. That's part of the joy of being a human being on this planet, is you can enjoy many cultures and see the similarities and the differences and enjoy all of that. But after 40 years, the images that I'm making now just sort of welled up inside of me. And I have so many brown ideas, I really don't know what to do with myself. I have a lot of brown ideas. They're still coming. And as long as they're coming, I'll continue to do them. One day the faucet will suddenly start dripping and I'll go, well, I guess that portfolio is finished, and I'll go back to the kinds of paintings that I was doing before, make them all Mexican, hit the fan. It hit the fan, boy. So I didn't choose to be socio-political. I don't think you can actually do that. I think that you have to develop what I call intellectual property based on experience, knowledge, belief systems, study, lots of study. And then after a while, if you're lucky and you're dedicated to it, the image will in itself appear. The kernel of the image will appear. And then it's your job as an artist to morph those ideas into multiple forms. The example that I use is when 9/11 hit, everybody started making American flags. And I just didn't feel it. But I collected a lot of materials around 9/11, lots of photographs, lots of newspapers. And I still haven't made my 9/11 piece because it just hasn't come to me. And I wasn't going to make the American flag because it just seemed an easy fix. And I'm really not the easy fix type. That's not what moves me. It's about coagulation of idea over decades of time to figure out what's just right. So I didn't choose to be socio-political. I just became socio-political as a natural, organic process. And I think that that's the kind of work, I believe for myself, that is the kind of work that has a larger statement to make. And I mix in humor with it, of course, data, historical information, to make it so that it has meat, something you could really sit down and enjoy digesting, as it were. So I'm not a romantic. It's kind of like I love humanity. I love the planet. I love everything about being alive, being a human being. But much like what we were talking about earlier, even though as I grow older, I have less and less faith in humanity in terms of its ability to live indivisibly, I still love being a human with all of its complexities and difficulties and ups and downs. And I think we're going through a lot of that right now in very big fashion. And my faith in humanity, as Man One was saying, is what keeps me going, keeps me positive through all of this very difficult times. The structures I'm not impressed by, but I do love humanity a great deal. And I love making art more than just about anything except for maybe my kids and my husband, my family.
I wanted to ask you something about one of your pieces, Linda, that the first time I saw it, I don't know why, out of all the pieces, I mean, I love your work and all that, but this one piece, I don't know why. I know why. I want to bring it up. So you have, in your Browning series, you have a Bob's Big Boy.
Yeah, I love Bob's Big Boy.
Right?
Yeah.
And that one's really interesting to me, very personal, because I grew up in Alhambra. Okay, for those who don't know, it's like in 10 minutes east of downtown LA, right? And growing up there, it was a very older white community.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I got into high school, it was a very Asian community, and it still is. It's probably, Alhambra is probably has the best Chinese food in LA. Probably it overtook Chinatown a long time ago. So, anyways, my point is that in Alhambra on Valley Boulevard, there was a Bob's Big Boy. It was the closest one that we knew about, and my dad loved to go there. So as a kid, we would always go there every weekend and have breakfast and stuff, right? There's always a big giant statue of Bob's Big Boy on the outside, and everyone always took pictures in front of it, and you hugged it and whatever, and it was such a part of my childhood, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I see it in one of your exhibits, and it's brown faced, right?
Yeah. Well, no, it's not. It's more than brown face. This is an important point. Yeah.
Okay.
He's brown.
You go ahead.
He's brown.
He's brown.
He's brown.
You're right. But when I saw him brown, it totally blew my mind, because I was like, as a child, all my life, I've loved Bob's Big Boy, and I never realized he wasn't brown.
Right. Oh, that's sweet.
You pointed it out. Oh my God, he's brown. You're right. It's part of my childhood. He's brown. And what makes this story, I think, even takes it to another level is if you go to that location where Bob's Big Boy used to be in Alhambra, Bob's Big Boy is long gone. It's been long gone for a long time.
Yeah.
I think there's a noodle planet there. Okay? In the same restaurant. Right?
Yeah.
And there's no more Bob's Big Boy outside where he used to be and all that, right? And so one time we went to go eat dinner at Noodle Planet, and you walk in, and if you go to the far back of the restaurant, there's the Bob's Big Boy still inside. They put it inside. They took it out of the street and put it inside in the back. So the only thing I can gather is that not only is Bob's Big Boy brown, he's also Asian. He's also black. So he's probably so many different colors and races. Because I can just imagine how many people had that same experience as me growing up, with this one iconic image, right?
Yeah.
So I love that.
Well, my parents did Bob's Big Boy when they were teenagers in East LA. Yeah. I mean, Bob's Big Boy was kind of like the original McDonald's, and it's a California icon.
Right.
The funny thing about that is that, people say, well, because I make them all Mexican. I make them all Mexican. Everything. I make I buy pricey antiques and paint the skin brown. And people say, well, why don't you do Frank Sinatra? And I say, yeah, sure. Go out and find him for me. You got to go to all the antique malls and look for Frank Sinatra and see what you find. Because part of what the process is really about is kind of like the segunda, which is a subculture of Latinismo in itself, because you have working class and working poor. They do a lot of their shopping at the secondhand stores. Well, I ended up in the secondhand stores and the antique malls. It's a part of the culture. It's a double entendre for anybody who knows the good joke, the good lifestyle. So you have to go out and find it. And when you go out there, what you find is a capsulated Americana, because everything that's in the segunda, everything that's in the antique mall belonged to your mother and your grandmother, and in some cases your great-grandmother, if you're lucky enough to find something that's from the early part of the century. So you're placed in a situation where you have to make brown what you find. I first started looking for Mexican imagery, and all you find really is a sleepy farm worker with a big hat on, leaning up against a cactus. Like, that's one of the images that you'll find repeated, but you won't find much of anything in terms of what Latinos within the culture. There's almost nothing out there. What you find a lot of is pop imagery and fake Victorian and fake European antiques. It's very, very interesting. You find, it's a Little Boy Blue. Forever, you find images of Little Boy Blue. And of course, I made him Little Boy Brown and Brownie. Instead of Pinky, she became Brownie. The first sculpture I ever saw, well, the first piece I ever saw in the store that ignited the whole idea was the Dick and Jane primer. See Dick run, see Spot play, see Jane, like those little books that all of us had to watch or read in second grade in the 50s, right? We were all reading the same books. And I looked at it and I said, damn, MF, I could just paint them brown. I could just make them all brown. Oh my God, I want to make them all Mexican. And that just sort of, it hit after about 4 years of thinking about how to use repurposed object while culling these things. And the first sculpture I ever saw that I did was, and this will tell you kind of how my brain works, so I found these little salt and pepper shakers of the Pilgrims, cute little salt and pepper shakers of the Pilgrims. And I said, damn, I'm going to make them brown. Who the hell invited who to dinner anyway? Yeah. Who had the corn? Who had the fish? Who had the turkey? Who exactly invited who to dinner? What is this all about?
Right.
I'm not only going to turn the politics of color and class on its head, I'm going to turn the politics of history on its head and make people ask questions about these. And I get a lot of responses. You know what little Big Boy's second name is? Did you see that? No. His second name is Muchachote.
Muchachote.
Muchachote. Big Boy.
Yeah.
Which has all kinds of other ramifications in a patriarchal society, which Latinismo so much is. Muchachote. Every guy wants to be muchachote.
Yeah.
Yeah. And every guy should be if his wife's doing the right job, right?
That's awesome. Oh, man.
Yeah, I've done everybody. Marilyn Monroe. My favorite is Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone.
Yeah.
I did Barney Rubble. I found these beautiful rubber images, and I made Barney, who's significantly shorter than Fred, really dark red brown. So he looks like a Centroamericano. He looks like a Guatemalteco. And my question there is really, so a short red-brown guy can be the best friend in the world and forgive this lumbering idiot every mistake he makes and all the times he disses Barney all the time, is always creating problems for him, but Barney's always coming back as the best friend you ever had. So why can't we see a short, dark guy as the best friend the most loyal friend you've ever known? So I get lots of laughs about a lot of things. Sometimes this is one of the good jokes, is I've had Latinos say this to me. Why you got to make them so dark?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Why you got to make them so dark? Yeah. And that's a tough question. You can create a lot of trouble because that's really talking about the inner politics. Speaking of indivisibility, we have indivisibility within races themselves, within communities themselves, right? Right? We have all the same difficulties in the smallest microcosm. So when the guy asked me this, I think it was a woman that actually asked me this, why you got to make him so dark? And of course, she was a darker girl herself.
Yeah.
And I looked up at the audience and said, well, I like him short and dark. What are you going to do? And then everybody cracked up. And then some guy at the back, some short, dark guy at the back goes, hey, hey.
So I have a question, though. I mean, to the extent that is about, idealizing the white persona, to the extent that is about some aspiration towards whiteness, what's it going to take to change that? When I was in China, right, I was in Shanghai, right, and I was walking around the shopping centers. Here I am in China, and all of the models and all of the ads were European. They were white, blue-eyed models. When I was in Haiti helping an NGO there, I couldn't help but notice the whitening cream in the local drugstore there because they want to lighten their skin. Let's talk about this. I mean, what's it going to take?
I'm going to answer this one. First of all, status is really important in the world. Status is viewed at this time. If you have to work outside like a farm worker or a essential worker, if you're out about on the streets all the time working, it's really hard to stay light. Put anybody outside, it's going to be really hard. People who have very wealthy and sort of structured lives, and they've got their own gym inside their house, and they've got their trainer, and the wealth, they're going to be fairer. And a lot of this has been throughout time. It's been throughout history. Even in Asia, you had people in the rice fields, and they're darker. And then you have the very wealthy who are inside the homes being served by the darker people. You have women wearing powder to make themselves lighter. I mean, this was what King Louis XVI in Europe and France, and the powdering of the face and the powdering of the wigs. And then you had the people in the fields who had ruddier skin and they were darker. So it's really about class in terms of how you get to take care of yourself. Unfortunately, there's people like me. This is about as light as I get. I could stay inside all day. I wouldn't get much lighter than this, just because of the pigmentation of my skin, which places me in a different position when I am in the context of social hierarchies. So you have, like before in Rubinette's times, really robust women were wanted because they got to stay inside all day, sit around and eat all day, and everybody else was starving in the fields. So skinny wasn't so good then, and voluptuous meant you were very wealthy and well taken care of. Nowadays, it's sort of the opposite. If you're sort of porky, sort of larger, more voluptuous, you probably eat too much junk food. And you're poor. So you don't have a chance to be able to eat organically and go to the best restaurants and have a chef and all these things. So class and class structures change depending on what people look like. And light and dark have been in the field of this question for a very, very long time. And if you look inside the African American community, they actually have descriptions of the lighter skinned and the darker skinned. Same with the Latinos. They have the same negative attributes for darker girls. Darker girls don't have access to education. Darker girls don't get the best marriages. I mean, this has kind of been going on for a very long time. Now, the other thing is that you have, if you'll excuse me, you have the Bible. And you have all the Christian negative and positives going on. We have light and dark. And light and dark is confused, as far as I can tell, in the Christian vernacular, where the dark is the devil and the light is God and the angels, where hell is very dark and dank and heaven is light and ethereal and bright and white and black. I mean, how much more clear can I say it? And as long as you have those two, that diametrically opposed coloration, if you will, to indicate good and bad, dark and light, evil and enlightened, all of these things, then humanity is not bright enough to be able to figure out that, you can have a white person that can be just about as evil as you can get, and you can have the darkest man in the neighborhood be kind and loving and joyous with his children. It has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. It's just these ideologies. So you have this class structure mixing in with it. Then you have this very old colonization of the planet where Christianity was sort of, the Christian ideology and vernacular was placed inside all the other religions. And as soon as you did that, all of a sudden everybody got like totally confused about what's light and what's dark. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, and there's a lot of scholars who are talking about colonialization right now and patriarchy and how all of these things that are kind of mixing in the way we feel about each other, rather than look at the character of a human being, the capacity for compassion, the capacity for insight, the capacity for creativity, generosity, love. This is what I believe we should be looking for, not gender or race or creed or color or orientation. The caliber of an individual matters more than anything. But unfortunately, most of humanity is not intelligent enough to be able to go that deep. They go just for superficial values. And I think just about everybody would agree with me on that. So you have I want to be a white model. Why do you want your age? Why would you want to be a white model? Why are you doing that? It's because of the way that you believe people would perceive you, that people would treat you. Maybe people would be kinder to you. Maybe you'd get a promotion. Maybe you'd make more money. Maybe you'd be more popular. Maybe you could afford a better husband. You could get a better husband. It's a pretty complicated brew. This is the kind of conversation that comes out of painting Bob's Big Boy Brown. Oh my God, what'd you do? Why's it got to be so dark?
Well, it's funny what you just said is so true. And
thanks for letting me say that.
Myself being a darker Latino, I've experienced a lot of what you're talking about, and I'm not on the far end of darkness. I'm not like really, really dark, but I'm darker than a lot, especially a lot.
You're dark enough. Let me tell you, you're dark enough.
I'm dark enough.
You're dark enough. So am I.
But because I love kind of these experiments that I do all the time, especially when I travel. People always ask me where I'm from because they're very confused because I'm dark, but I'm 6'1".
Oh yeah, you would. Well, you would confuse them. You would.
I have long hair. I have different look about me, I guess, and it confuses people. So I always like traveling, and people, when they ask me that, I say, "You tell me where I'm from. I want to know. I want to know where you think I'm from, right?" So.
And what do they tell you? What do they tell you? Where do they think you're from?
it's interesting. I've gotten Samoan, I've got Native American, I've gotten Black, I've gotten Japanese, and it's funny, like they'll just go down Middle Eastern, Pakistani. I've gotten like the whole range, and rarely do they ever say Mexican. That's never like the first or second thing they say. And I always find that funny because it's like, as soon as I tell them, well, my parents are from Mexico, and they're like, but you're tall, but you have long hair, but your eyes are a little bit slanted. You look Oriental a little bit, and I'm like, it's so funny because, it's just these preconceived notions that people have of what you should look like if you're from a certain place.
Well, how you should think, how you should talk, how you should walk, what you want, what you don't want.
Yeah.
The Pew Charitable Trust just did a study of Mexican women in the Southwest, and they found that 80% of Mexican American women living in the Southwest, that includes me, 80% of them have Apache and Navajo blood. Because, there was no a border, and so the men would just marry into other tribes going back and forth. And so, yeah, get real.
One of the funnier things was I was somewhere in like Alabama or something like that. I was on tour throughout the country, and we were staying at this hotel on this one night. And so I went swimming. So my hair was all down, right? And so I'm swimming in the pool, and there's an old white couple in the pool with me. That's it. And they're looking at me for a while, and finally they approach me and they say, "Hey, can we ask you a question?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." They're like, "What tribe are you from?" I said, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Yeah, I think the guy says, I think you're Cherokee." And then I said, "No, I'm not Cherokee." And then the wife goes, "I told you he was Navajo." And I said, "I'm not Navajo either." And then they're like, "What?" Yeah. And then I said, "I'm Mexican." And they just like, they couldn't, it so threw them off that their next statement was, "Oh, well, we like Mexican food. What's that favorite place that we go to all the time?" And the wife's like, "Oh, Taco Bell. Yeah, we love Taco Bell."
What generation Californian are you?
I was born in East LA. My parents both came from Mexico in the late 60s. Mm-hmm. So I was the first one born here in the States. I'm first generation. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I wanted to go to college, actually, aside obviously from just getting my degree and learning or whatever, but one of the reasons behind that was obviously being a graffiti artist. I knew there was a lot of other graffiti artists that I was competing against, but most of them didn't have college degrees. So I figured if I got a college degree, I would be able to, to stand out a little bit more over my peers. Well, the other thing that came out of that was that I'm also a Latino with an education. And I never realized how that throws people off in the quote unquote real world later on, when I started traveling, when I started discovering what I wanted to do and how I wanted to approach things. And once people understand that I have an education, it's so interesting how people's vision of you or what they think, their preconceived notion of you changes, very quickly. It's just interesting, but that's part of the world we live in,
Yeah, you have to have, I think everybody, regardless, needs to have a college education. Everybody needs to have an MBA or a master's degree if they can muster up to it. Mostly just because for self, to learn how to learn, to learn how to study, and to learn how to converse. Like a lot of places where I end up in conversations on pretty heavy topics like today. I mean, we're talking some pretty heavy topics. To be able to share your ideas verbally is a really important thing to be able to do, no matter what lifestyle you choose. But for myself personally, as again a woman of color who is basically at the bottom of the totem pole, to be able to open my mouth and say a lot of hopefully interesting and intelligent things helps people to become more interested in seeing the images that I'm producing. I can write about my work, and I write about my work a lot, and I work with artists to learn how to write about their work. And I think that language is something that's really inherent in higher education, is language, reading, writing, and speaking. Yeah, I would agree with you. I got a master in fine arts so that I would have a little more cachet out there in a world that I knew would be pretty tough on me as an artist.
That's the world we live in.
I think it's the world we've always lived in. It's kind of shifting. Like one of the things that happened, people ask me all the time because I also made all the presidents brown. Yeah, and I make all the wealthiest of the wealthy brown as well. And the question really is, would the world really be a different place if the race was reversed, where the black and brown was on top and the Asian was in the middle and the white was at the bottom in terms of economic stability and positions of power? And unfortunately, my answer is no. It wouldn't be any different. It would be a mixture of the same kind of stuff that humanity is only capable of. You'd have men would still be at the top of the pile without a doubt. Women would still be relegated to positions that they're not always happy in, if you will. Some women really, like myself, I'm pretty traditional in terms of a home, but a lot of girls I know, they have no interest at all, especially artist types. But I think that kind of goes back to what I said at the very beginning. I'm not trying to say that a brown and black world would be a better world. I'm really not sure that's would work. And maybe that's where Indivisible comes to, is what does it really mean to be indivisible? As long as you have a hierarchy, right, of the haves and have-nots anywhere, whether it's in a room of peered artists, people do that a lot. They create hierarchies in rooms of artists. Yeah. They create hierarchies, and I don't know, families create hierarchies and relatives. We just tend to do this thing where we build a pyramid. Every pun intended.
Yeah.
We keep building this pyramid. I think I think humanity is basically a war machine. This seems to be what we enjoy the most. The guys just can't get away from war. They just love that stuff. They love the guns. They love the violence. There's something about it. I'm just not. I'm hoping that the image I produce brings up some of these questions, at least so that people can come to some understanding of how they feel about it, so that they can reconcile their own lives, reconcile like one-on-one the relationships they have with their own children, with their parents, with their neighbors. And I don't think that people expect that to come out of me. Well, you want it all to be brown, right? How come why it got to be brown? Why it got, like, they get all up inside of me about it. And I'm like, it's just some questions, man. All it is a bunch of questions. I'm just asking, what would happen? Yeah. And unfortunately, my answer is not much. I asked Linda Ronstadt one. I said, imagine what the music world would be like if Elvis Presley had been Mexican. She said, well, yeah. She said, tell me about it. Her world would have certainly been different if the greatest, if one of the greatest rock and roll, one of the greatest rock and roll came out of Mexico. I mean, that would have changed the whole world upside down.
Right. Well, it's funny how, you took it one way with your art in terms of, the browning, as a metaphor, and speak on race and all that in that way. I took it the other way. My paintings, when I do portraits and things like that, they're multiple colors. They're always as bright and varied colors as possible, right? And my point on doing that is to express that, the color is about who we are as people, and our energy and our spirit, and the more important things about us, not the flesh tone, but it's everything inside of us, right? And that's kind of what I want to reveal with the color. But it's so funny because let's say I paint a African American person in my style. Someone always wants to say, oh, that's a black person, right? Like, they still want to negate the whole issue that I'm bringing up in terms of the color and the energy and what their insides are about, or whatever. It's about beauty.
Yeah.
Like, instead of just talking about beauty, and this, someone always has to take it back to, oh, that's a Mexican guy you painted, or that's a black person you painted, or that's. Yeah. And but I guess that's part of the conversation, right? It's like, why do we do that? Why do we always go back to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've done photographs. I paint on photographs and make photographs brown too. And, I do something really funny. I change their noses. I change their noses out. Yeah. And I give them either the real Indio nose or the chato, do the chato. Yeah. And I always have to give a lot of them an upper lip, because a lot of the Caucasian races don't have an upper lip. And so I'm always painting on that upper, and it's funny, but it's kind of, damn, Linda. And people will look at it, right? And they'll go, who is that? It'll be, I don't know what, Katharine Hepburn. right? And they'll look at the who
Right.
is that? She's Latina, right? Who? And they're trying to figure out who the Latina movie star is
Yeah.
that I painted. I'm kind of like, no, I just gave her a bigger upper lip. I gave him a mustache.
Yeah.
I'm always joking about it because it's such a tough topic. Like this idea of questioning whether, I mean, in essence, what you're saying is that someone would look at an energetic painting of a man and boil it all the way back down to his race,
Right.
rather than saying, "Wow, look at the energy coming out of that guy's head. I wonder what he likes to talk about, or
Yeah.
what he reads, or what kind of music he listens to, what
Yeah.
kind of spirituality he practices." I mean, that's where we started today. As I have boiled it down to the lowest common denominator, but it was just a crazy idea that I had, an insane idea that I had, and I went out and bought $3,000 worth of antiques and just said, "The hell with it. I'm just gonna." It's insanity, but
Yeah.
you have to follow the art where it comes from.
But then people in real life will go get Botox injected into their lips, right? They'll get their noses redone.
They'll get their skin bleached.
Right?
They'll buy a designer bag that they only bring out when they're going to go to Rodeo Drive. It's all the designer clothing that they need so that you can have this status where people will respect you because it's a guarantee.
And now there are butt implants.
Yeah.
Women are getting butt implants so they have a bigger ass. I mean, I'm guessing most of those women are white, which is very interesting.
Well, this is nothing new. When you think about when you think about the Victorian age, and the Victorian age practiced all over the world. It wasn't just in Europe, it was in the United States, it was even in Asia. They had these body pads for women, and women strapped on body pads to make the bustle fit right, to make the front of the body be almost completely flat with the breasts higher underneath a plate. I mean, they did all these weird body shaping things. And if you were wealthy, you could afford all of these pads. It was a form of status. Whereas the women in the fields, Native American women didn't wear corsets. Mexican women didn't wear corsets in the fields. I mean, who could work? It's just about beauty and status, and it's everywhere all the time. And the wealthy can afford these things, and the middle class and working class can't afford it, or don't give a damn about it, or have more important things to do. I'd rather spend that money on material.
Vanity really is a luxury, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you can afford to be vain or not.
Well, what occurs to me is that a lot of these women who do these things, they kind of all look the same. Have you noticed? There's kind of like if you'll allow me just to coin something, it's like a Barbie look.
Mm.
Yeah.
We could just call it for a moment a Barbie look. I know it's more complicated than that, but if we do that, then we have a certain kind of hair, tinted in a certain way, curled in a certain way, a certain kind of face and nose and bust line and shape and coloration. When I see a lot of women, if you go to certain very wealthy kind of areas, you kind of go, wow, it's a look. And I think it has to do more with low self-esteem than high self-esteem, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't want to look like everybody else. I want to look like my mom and my dad and my grandma, my grandpa. I want to look like me. So I think it's really more about low self-esteem. And I think maybe that's even one of the nuances of patriarchy and colonialism that we need to really think about. Because American women, well, not only that, but European women are into it as well. Asian women are certainly into it. The higher echelons of money around the world are doing this thing. I would think to please men. That's what I would.
But one of the things that always tripped me out is I read this thing many years ago where the guy I can't remember the guy's name that was talking about it, but he was saying that Amerigo Vespucci, right, who was known as the guy who America was named after.
Mm-hmm. Vespucci.
You always say it's because of the maps that he drew of, right?
Yes.
This guy was saying it wasn't really the maps that made people come over here. It wasn't the fact that he created these maps. It was the letters that he was writing to his friends back in Europe. And some of those letters, he was explaining how these Native American women, these Indians or whatever, that they would have babies and their stomachs would be flat again afterwards.
Oh.
And it was such an amazing thing that these women's bodies would never lose shape, even after multiple babies. So all of a sudden you had, talking about the patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
So now you had men coming over from Europe because they wanted to see what's up with these amazing women who, after they had their babies, they never lost their shape.
Like the Amazon women. It's
Yeah. So, you know, this whole thing, it's like, wow, it's crazy, but that's, you know, that's
Well, they say that war actually began, that war actually started, that the activity of war itself was actually a fight between men over women.
it had to be. I don't know why else would go to war.
Yeah.
I have a theory about all of this, which, you know, again, it's just a theory, but perhaps man's greatest accomplishment is getting out of the food chain.
Who's food chain?
Right? Like somehow if you agree that we're animals, right? If you agree that we're part of this natural ecosystem, you know, man, as he evolved at some point, there were real predators, right? It was kill or be killed, you know, and somehow, some way, man figured out how to get out of the food chain. Okay? But this instinct of predator prey, fight or flight was still very much in us.
Yeah.
Right. It's interesting to think, like, how did that manifest, or how did it get reborn? Well, mating, fighting over a woman, perhaps, fighting over, you have the food now, so I'm going to conquer your village. Right. And then on and on. And so this idea of violence, maybe even this idea of racism, is somehow this idea of other, right, is somehow connected to this very primal animal kind of instinct that's still in us, even though we got out of the food chain.
Conquer or be conquered.
Yeah.
But is that mostly a male trait or a human trait?
I think it's a human trait because it's survival.
That's an interesting question, because now we have women leadership. You know, who's to say that women leadership is better than male leadership? It's just about mixing it up for me. Why shouldn't women be leaders? But I don't expect women leaders to be angelic or visionary any more than men are. But why shouldn't women have a chance to go out there too? What's the big deal here? You know, let women do it. Let people of all color do it. Everybody should have a chance. But conquer and be conquered, I think it is part of our DNA. I think war is part of our DNA. And as long as war is connected to money as strongly as it is today, to sales and money, right, and resources, because war is still connected to resources. Yeah. As long as it's that we can go over and take that guy's stuff. We can go over there with bigger weapons and take that guy's stuff. We can take it all. Destroy all the leadership. I mean, this is a really old formula. Walk in, destroy all the old leadership, destroy all the medicine people, destroy all the knowledge, and take all the women and all the kids and make slaves out of them. I mean, this is really old. This is the Aztecas were really good at this. There were certain Native American tribes that were basically warring tribes. I would say that when you have an agrarian society, you know, based on crops and growing things and weaving and all the sort of some like what the Hopi, the Tibetan, then you have less of this need for aggression and violence. But unfortunately, that's very limited. Most people really like it. I mean, look at media. Look at media. Look what people like to watch. They love it, man. It just comes natural to us, and it's really not a nice thing to say about us. They were basically pretty violent species. I mean, what was it? The idea of we're always having to vilify any creatures from extraterrestrial creatures. We always have to vilify the other, to get back to your word. We're always vilifying rather than just trusting and believing that there's something we could find together. There's something we could build together.
Well, and this gets back to this idea of indivisibility, because being indivisible is not, in my view, is not to imply we are the same, right? Indivisibility is on some level about recognizing that we're, in spite of our differences, we're all in this together. And, you know, this word diversity gets used a lot in many different ways. And Linda, you were talking a minute ago about, you know, would women be better in power? You know, and the reality is we don't, you know, maybe not, who knows? But scientists are very aware that for our ecosystem on this planet to be healthy and be vibrant, it needs to be diverse. We need a diverse of insects and animals and species, and when these species become extinct and or endangered, the ecosystem is threatened. And I feel like if you extrapolate that out into our humanity and how we govern and how we manage things, we need a diverse body of leaders. We need a diverse body of voices. And that's when you lose that diversity, that's when you start being threatened. And so it's not like for me, it becomes not about, are women going to be better leaders than men? No, together they will make each other better. If only we would take the chance.
We really don't have any choice. The world is diverse. I mean, we could go off and kill all the diversity that exists, but I don't know if that would really ever work. I don't think that would really function. It's been tried.
Yeah.
It's been tried to kill out full races of people. I don't need to mention any races, but it's been tried on all around. It's been tried everywhere. And it doesn't seem to really work. It just creates bloodshed, just begets bloodshed and confusion. I don't think it's for myself personally. It isn't. I don't need to agree with you. I don't need to have the same belief system that you do. I've said this before. I don't need the security of that. That the fact that you're different, that you think differently, that you work differently, that you have different, that you function in the world in a different way doesn't scare me, because I know who I am and I know what I do and I know why I do it and I know what I believe in personally. I've spent my whole life building a belief system and a way to function that I can live with. And I hope that my reputation is one of being a very sweet friend of mine recently, who I respect greatly, said, "Oh, Linda, you're so soulful." And it was one of the finest compliments I'd ever received from someone who I have a great deal of respect for. I'm always searching, for the answer and stuff. But if we could just feel this way about each other rather than feeling that everybody has to be the same, kind of like we're going back to this whole thing about everybody's got to get a butt implant. Why do we all have to be the same? Exactly why do we need to do that? I'm not sure. And is it so that I can respect you because you look like me? If you bleach your skin and you cut off all your hair and you started wearing something differently, would that mean that I would respect you as an artist more? I think that's really not very intelligent. It's quite erroneous. It's a pretty simple formula. Diversity is here to stay, and we need to acknowledge and respect everyone regardless.
Yeah.
I don't get what the difficulty is. I just don't understand it. I think fear, low self-esteem, and indoctrination, which doesn't really belong to you, but belongs to somebody else that you take on, but you don't really believe. I certainly don't believe in systems that relegate the only activity to violence. I'm not going to become a member of a group where I have to go out and destroy stuff. It's not going to happen. Man, Juan, how are you about that?
Well, I mean, I think you're totally right. And one of the things that, and maybe you touched on it earlier, is that I think as human beings, we have a flaw, or many flaws, but one of them is that we always have to find something to argue about, or we always have to find something to make wrong, or we always have to be better than something else, right? We can't just be at peace. I love meeting people who are completely different than me. I learned so much from people who have different beliefs, who look different than me, who speak different than me. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the beauty of humanity. That's why I love to travel, because I get to meet people who are come from way different backgrounds, have a whole different approach to life. And it makes me grow. It makes me expand who I am. So I'm thankful for that. Wow, I'm glad I'm in this earth with people like you. But you meet these people who, they don't want that. They just want you to have the same accent, have the same look, come from the same part of the country. And you're like, really? That's what you want in life? You want everyone to just be like you? And it's so sad. It's so small. There's no future in that. I think as artists, that's kind of what one of the things we're kind of implying all the time, is that all of us as artists are unique and different, and we're coming at life and exhibiting in a different way. Could you imagine going to a museum where every painting was the same? What would be the point?
That's actually a nice piece. That's actually a pretty nice piece. Yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think that'd be funny as hell. Maybe I'll steal that. That's a pretty good one.
Go ahead.
Or you go into rent a whole museum and go in and just duplicate everything and just put it up on the wall and go, this is the future of art from this
Yeah.
person's point of view. This is what we would get. I think that's a pretty good thing. I think you could actually. That sounds funny. That sounds really funny. Like you'd walk in and go, hell, what the hell? What do you mean? What the hell? And all of a sudden.
Linda, I'm going to go on record right now and just say that Crew West Studio will help sponsor that installation.
Let's go for it.
I mean,
I think it'd be pretty easy to do. I mean, it's not like it's more conceptual than it is about, because it's all just declays. We could just pick one image. I mean, what would the image be is kind of a funny thing. That's the choice. What would the image be? Which is kind of funny. It would have to be something really old and classical and very well known to everybody. Like the Mona Lisa everywhere. That's that kind of a thing. Like the Mona Lisa on every wall, little itty bitty ones, medium-sized ones, giant ones, a huge mural. Everything is nothing but her. one with just her hand, one with just her neck. Little parts of the painting, little pieces, but it's just like one view, no matter what you do, no matter where you turn. It'd be the wallpaper in the bathroom. It'd be on the toilet paper.
Right.
The brochures would have it all over the place, and
the gift shop would have everything.
Nothing but her, and everybody in the whole place would have to dress like her. It'd be kind of like the Renaissance Fair, right? The Renaissance Fair. Right. I wonder what you'd be eating at the opening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's something that already looks like that happens every year, and whenever I go to these Chicano shows and all they have is Frida paintings.
I know. I'm so good. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for letting me off the hook.
Every time I look and it's like, oh no, not another Frida. Like, come on.
Well, do you guys have an idea in your head or what? You guys have an idea in your head or what? Do you have? I mean, I can't. I taught a class once. It was one of those classes I was talking about earlier, where I help artists write about their work and develop some business acumen.
Yeah. And
I had a Mexicana in my class. She was in my class, and class was over and we were sort of sitting around. She just looked at me and she said something really funny. She said, "Why does El Chicano artwork look like artesanía?" And I thought, damn, girl, you should get on the radio.
Yeah.
You should get on the radio and start talking about it. It's because I think it's, in order to come up with really interesting image, not repetitious image, you really have to spend some time thinking about it.
Right.
You really have to devote energy and study and research and experimentation into something that actually has something to say.
Yeah.
To me, it's more like decorative work than what I would consider to be fine art, because fine art has a point of view. Fine art has it has a political point of view. It has a view about beauty. It has a view about culture. It has a view about politics. It has a view. It has, and the best work has very strong views. The strongest work has very strong views, one way or the other. But repetitions of Frida, to me, there's no point of view in that.
Right.
To me, it's, I need to make some extra money for Christmas, so I think I'll do Frida with little Santa Claus earrings.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, okay, chill. Go for it. Thank you for letting me off the hook, because when I talk about that, I get really, I don't know what to do with myself. I just like, really, okay.
I'll take the hate mail for this one.
At least it's at the end of the interview. Maybe people won't listen this long to hear how really backwards we are in terms of our understanding of Chicano art.
Right.
Backwards or progressive?
Well, I'm making a terrifying joke. We're not only progressive. I think, both of us have had the opportunity to exhibit internationally, and we're being invited to exhibit solos regularly, and I'm being published regularly. Manuan's resume is spectacular. His bio is unbelievable, and you just kind of think, well, how does somebody do that? Like a lot of artists want to know, how do you do that? Well, you do it by having a singular vision and a point of view, a very specific point of view that you can articulate.
Yeah.
You have to, and that just doesn't come because you buy a Happy Meal. It doesn't come like that. It's a lifetime of work and investigation, and you have to know a good idea when you see it. You got to be able to. You have to be willing to go for it, regardless. And if you're just doing repetitions of other people's work and little bits and pieces, that doesn't fit any of those bills, and that's why you don't get solos and opportunities to show great bodies of work.
Yeah.
You know?
I have a T-shirt series that I want to do that goes along. It's going to tie in beautifully what we just spoke about on all levels. So these T-shirts are just going to be print talking about Frida. One of them is going to say Frida was Antifa. So that's going to be the shirt. And
Oh my goodness!
and I'm going to do a whole series of artists, anti-fascist artists. I just want to put it out there. So I won't reveal the whole series, but Frida was Antifa will be one of them.
Oh wow! Will it just be words, or will there be an image attached?
Online, I'm gonna put an image attached of the artist's work, like on Twitter or whatever. But on the shirts, I was thinking of just doing text.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty intellectual, actually.
Yeah.
You know, that's a pretty intellectual object.
Thank you. So yeah, that's a series that I've been thinking about the last few weeks, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna make it a T-shirt series. That'll be that's where I'm gonna start with it.
Well, it's kind of, it's a matter of, I guess you'd have to do like some kind of how they have those funny little things where you have women buy clothes. You go in and you buy clothes, and they actually have a video of the girl wearing the clothes.
Yeah.
And she walks in and does the thing, and she does the thing, and she does the twist, and she shows you the clothes,
and
then she ends up in a pose. It'd be funny to have a series of videos with the T-shirts. Like a sort of a take on, wearable art and what it means to wear things. I mean, and you could have the most ridiculous people wearing them, people that you wouldn't expect. Certainly not the bleached blondes with the butt implants. Different kinds of people. That'd be kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm working on really big installation now, room size installation.
Oh wow.
Based on the politics of power.
Mm-hmm.
And Brown. I'm really, really excited. Multiple concepts are coming together to create a multifaceted installation with works on paper, paintings, mixed media objects, life-size objects, even sound. I'm working on sound based on the politics of colonialism that I've been working on for a long time, a sound object that I'm really, really excited about. I don't know, maybe I'll be able to pull it off. I hope so. I would like to.
Where is it
So,
going to be? You have
I don't want to let any cats out of the bag, but I just had a meeting. I've been commissioned by a museum to install it and to travel it. I think the entire installation could be maybe something close to, I don't know, 50 to 100 objects. I'm very, very excited. You'll like this. I bought a spray gun, bought a giant spray gun. You'll like that.
Yeah.
You can imagine me out there with the goggles and the big apron, spraying the brown, the hell of brown out of everything.
That's right.
And you can see the color in the back here is like a milk chocolate. I found that milk chocolate is the least offensive brown for people of all races. I think because it's connected to food. Milk chocolate con leche. Someone the other day called it con leche. Somehow or another, people can accept the brown if it looks like it's delicious and it's sweet and it's edible. And somehow or another, that doesn't offend them. Rather than doing like a dark chocolate, boy, that offends everybody except for me, because I like them short and dark.
Yeah,
I don't care. It doesn't matter to me, but it matters to just about everybody. I'll be excited to see your T-shirts. I want one.
Yeah. I get you.
I want one.
Awesome.
Well, Linda Vallejo, Man One, I want to thank you both for joining us here today and taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk about these important topics. I'm so grateful that you guys are both in the Indivisible show. I want to remind everybody that the show opens online October 17th. You can learn more on the website at indivisible2020.org. The Zoom reception, where you as the artist will be there and speak to your work and address the attendees, that will be on October 24th at 12 o'clock. Again, all the information will be on indivisible2020.org. Any parting words or thoughts as we sign off here?
Got something to say, man?
Yeah, I just want to say there's Sasquatch over your shoulder, and we haven't addressed it at all. And it's like freaking Bigfoot is in the back of the shot here, and we haven't addressed it. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm gonna say.
Made out of chocolate milk.
Yeah.
Yes, made out of chocolate. And the Coca-Cola bottle's sitting right next to him.
Yeah.
Somebody
By
asked
the
me,
way, I just want to say for our listeners who can't see what we're seeing, I mean, Linda has set the camera such that we get a view into her studio and the various works. And above her left shoulder, I think, is truly a Sasquatch, a brown Sasquatch.
he's like 48 inches tall.
Yeah.
He's a pretty good replica. I found him at an antique mall, outdoor antique mall, of course, before COVID. He's a pretty good replica of what might be considered the passage point between what ancient man and modern man, right? He's the last ancient man that lives in the forest, right? So why the hell wouldn't he be Mexican too?
Yeah, he is.
Why the hell wouldn't he, right? He's a man of color. There's no doubt about it. There's no ins and outs about it. And so he's funny, but he's anthropological too, because now they're unearthing all of this study that's being done, anthropological study that's being done in the Americas right now. They are finding thousands of new sites. They are finding all kinds of corn from thousands and thousands of years ago. All of the historical lines of where Latinos came from, how long we've been in the continent, what our contributions have been to the world, have been just sort of never really investigated until just recently, because a lot of photography, the photography that can be done, the sort of the X-ray photography, the aerial photography.
Yeah.
There's so much left to be told about the Americas and the people of the Americas and what we offer to the whole world. And so I thought it was kind of funny to just kind of unearth that part and begin that conversation. He's got great eyes too. You should see him. He's got the perfect nose. I didn't have to change that one. Perfect nose.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to speak my mind on some very interesting and what can be difficult issues for everyone to speak to and about at this time, especially. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very pleased to be a part of the show and really pleased to be here with Man One. I think this is the first time we've ever really had a chance to have a good chat.
Yeah.
It's about time, Essay.
It's about time. Yeah, no, and so, it was awesome speaking with you and learning from you always. But, that's what this show, I think, is what I'm excited about, is that we just have so many different artists in the show, and I'm glad to bring my point of view to it, but I think all the viewers will be able to gain a lot of insight as to who we are, what we are, and where we are. And I think that's what this show will speak to. So I'm proud to be part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, art really can speak to the mix. It really can offer up questions and answers and possibilities. And, it's good that we get to stand up at this time and actually be cogent to the very serious conversations that are taking on place about, human rights, socio-political issues, what environmental rights, all the things that we all have strong beliefs about. Thanks again, you guys. It's been great.
Yeah.
So welcome. And you may be happy to know that our intention is to do this show annually. We want, this idea of indivisibility is, as we've discussed, right? It's a tricky one. It's largely aspirational, and yet we all are human beings united on this planet, and it's a conversation that is evergreen and that should never stop. And so we want this show to be an annual show, and I hope that both of you will consider coming back next year as well.
Well, if you like Brown, you can always have me around.
Well, come on down. I like Brown, so come on down.
Welcome back now.
Yeah. By the way, with that, we should probably end it.
All right.
You have a beautiful day, both of you. Many thanks of gratitude for your time.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers.
Take care.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to like this episode, write a review, and share with your friends on social. And if you haven't already done so, please press the subscribe button and follow us on Instagram at Not Real Art World. If you're an artist, be sure to apply for our 2021 artist grant at notrealart.com. Sourdough out.